Hi, 8th graders. I just want to talk to you guys real quick and show you some basic differences between a wind-driven, your typical ocean wave, and a tsunami. And hopefully some of the reading that you're going to do and the videos that you watch will also reinforce this, but I think it's important just to take a couple minutes and kind of look at this on the whiteboard here. So it's a nice fall day here for me recording this lesson, so figured I'd try to do it outside. Hope the lighting's okay. So when we look at waves, if we're looking at your typical ocean wave, which is generated by wind, so wind blows across the top of the water for long periods of time, creates waves, and that's what we see. And typically you see them once they get to the beach. So once they get to the beach, generally we're going to have something like, cartoon version of this, but we're going to have something like those types of waves there. We know from your previous lessons that this distance here is the wave length, right? Crest to crest or trough to trough. Yeah. If you were to go to the beach or the coast somewhere and to watch the waves come in as they're crashing or right before they crash, your wavelengths could be anywhere from as short as 5-6 meters to 30 or 40 meters. So the distance between these being, let's just call it 25 meters. Make it something simple like that. When you're looking at a tsunami, this is what's different. And so before I draw the tsunami, I want to try to give you a visualization here. So I'm going to turn this toward me for a second. But if you ever think of, I think the easiest way to think of how a tsunami is created, a lot of these are undersea plate movement. And so I like to think of it is if you were standing in a pool, let's say you were standing in a pool like chest high water, okay? Maybe a little bit higher, maybe up to your neck would be easier. So if you're standing in a pool with water up to your neck and you held your hands underwater. So yeah, it'd be easier if the water were here and you held your hands underwater and you just did this real quick. Didn't break the surface, but just did that. What would happen to the water above? What you would have is a huge bulge of water that kind of rises up and then splashes out or kind of creates waves moving out. And you might have one or two and then it would settle back down. So if you are at a pool anytime and you think of doing this, just stand underwater, maybe with your hands like at waist high, water up to your neck or so, and just do that a couple times. And you'll see a big bulge of water. So if we think of our plates, if we have undersea plate movement, okay, you might have two plates moving where they're strike, some type of fault here, and one plate builds up energy and then slips and has that upward movement. Well, if it's covered by ocean water, sometimes miles of ocean water, that water has to go somewhere. And so that's where we create some of that upward motion. Okay? So if we go back to our whiteboard and think about this now, if we think about this now, we've got our typical ocean wave up here. We decided 25 meters just to come up with a kind of standard wavelength that's going to vary a lot. But when we look at those tsunamis, think of it like this. Think of your tsunami like this, like a wave. So as you think of these waves coming into the shore, they're coming in, kind of rising up, cresting, and breaking. And so you can kind of look at even the thickness of this wave, which we don't have a scientific term for that I'm aware of. Maybe an oceanographer could tell us different, but the thickness of this wave might be, less than a meter. Okay, and the distance to the next wave is around, we'll say again, we're using 25 meters as an example. So if we look at a tsunami, though, okay, we essentially have maybe the same front here. But it's like thinking of a wave that has no back. Okay? So this wavelength could be up to up to 500 kilometers. That's 310 miles. So you go from a distance or a difference of maybe 25 meters to what if the back of this wave was 310 miles out to sea. What's it going to look like when this crashes and hits the shore? Okay, it's not going to look like your typical wave that breaks and recedes and breaks and recedes in between each of these. It's going to look like a flood. It's a wave that crashes and just keeps on coming. You'll see that in some of the documentary and the videos that I show you, but this doesn't look like your typical wave. If you've seen the Hollywood version of this, where you have this giant arching wave that's coming over the Statue of Liberty in New York City, usually is what they try to use, that's not what it's going to look like. It's just going to look like a flood. It's almost going to look like a dam burst or a river overflowed, and the water just keeps coming. It just keeps coming in. Okay? You've got to get to 500 kilometers away before then it recedes again, and then another one might come in depending on the severity of what event created that tsunami to begin with. Okay, so this is the big difference. It's wavelength. Okay, and one of the discussions I asked you to think about why we sometimes refer to these as tidal waves. Think about how a tide might behave similar to this, and how maybe early people, before we knew the science behind this, might have confused this with some sort of tidal event. Okay, so hopefully this helps. Use this as you're watching some of the documentaries and adding to those discussion boards.